There's Mahomes as your franchise quarterback. But how has it gone to this point, and what does the future look like for him and this team on a three-peat run today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more. Right now, new customers are getting $150 back in bonus bets for winning just a $5 bet. That's $150 back for a $5 bet win at FanDuel.com/locked-on. Go over there to get started. We're getting started here as OTA's Phase 3 takes the next step forward here coming this week. We want to take a step back, and how did they get here? Patrick Mahomes is, especially with all the talk about extensions for other quarterbacks that I would call questionable, he is the guy that we have to go over. We're going to take different perspectives of it. Chris, over at Chiefs Corner, is going to give you all the quarterback stats as they relate to the cap and to performance and the whole 9 yards together from the business side. I am Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting. I want to look at the athleticism side, the team building side. You can find more information on that at rogueapc.com, NFL33.com, and obviously rgrfootball.com if you need to go there. Here on the platform, all of those things wrap up towards what is this franchise and how did they get into position, not just for this season to make a historic run at a possibility, but years to come and what falls off eventually. And looks like we have to take a stock right now at this point. So we're going to do that. The glory of the playoffs as to Patrick Mahomes' career to this point, what it's meant to those standout moments, and what is his career and how different is it that we probably just take for granted at this point. That's coming up today. And we'll start very much there. What is the number one thing that you look at and where his career is right now?
Well, I think what you look at is you look at his career stats versus other QBs in the same amount of games. And this is something that I started tracking. I have to say, Scott Kasmer, and I wish I had the spelling of it. He tracked this originally. I pulled it, and I've been tracking it for the past year. But let's start with the number of games he's played. He's played in 95 games to this point in his NFL career. That doesn't include playoffs because that doesn't go into the overall stats of a player. He is leading since game 67 of his career. He's got the most touchdowns. And that started off, he tied that. He got to that point starting in week 8 or in game number 8 of his career. He got to 22 touchdowns, and he led from game 8 to game 58, and then lost out to Dan Marino for about 10 games, and then came back to be the leader of TDs thrown through 95 games. Now, the thing that sticks out to me on this is this looks at just not seasons, but it looks at games, which to me is more important because you're talking injuries don't play into it. Patrick Mahomes only playing one game his first year. Really throws off a lot of stuff when you start talking about seasons and try to compare season stats, even though his season stats probably are better than 99% of the QBs that have played in 7 seasons when he only played one game the first year. But what's really interesting to me is Tom Brady is talked about as being the greatest of all time at QB. And it's because his stats are the best that has ever been. He played in 335 games in his career. And in his career, he threw for 649 touchdowns. That is the all-time lead. Patrick Mahomes, on his current pace, if he was to play 335 games, would throw for 798 touchdowns in his career.
That's not
almost 150 more.
Wow.
In the same games.
That's, to me, that sets you apart. And we won't know until it's over, right? We'll make this argument for the next 10 years. But just knowing what that pace is based on, and I like that you broke it down by in games, that's incredible to think of just how close that competition is. And I already tease about calling him the GOAT now. And maybe, there's a few comedians that just had their way with Tom Brady that might agree. But there's plenty there to suggest that pace is literal and achievable. And that's what it comes down to is can you continue to do what you need to do to stay on that pace?
Okay, so that's touchdowns. Here's another fun one. I also did it for yards. And again, this goes back to Scott Kasmer. I stole his numbers for the first part, and I have tracked it through. So Mahomes took till game 7 in his career to pass Cam Newton, who had the most passing yards in his career for the first 6 games. And at game 7, Mahomes had 2,100 yards and passed Cam Newton, and does not ever get passed in yardage ever from 7 to 95. He is led from his 7th game on through 95 games. And I didn't say this before, and I need to go back and say this. He is currently at 95 games, has 218 touchdowns, and he leads, 219 touchdowns. I apologize. And he is not going to have Marino pass him for another 7 games. So without throwing another touchdown, he could play 7 more games and still have the lead. Now, when you get into passing yards, it's very similar to that in the sense that there's, I think, 6 games that he leads it by. So you're sitting here in a situation where you're talking about statistics where he's just absolutely killing people. And it's not, in this case, it's not Dan Marino. It's going to be Matt Stafford who would catch him in 6 games. But Mahomes has 28,180 yards in his career. 28,425 yards in his career, 96 games. And the all-time leader is obviously Tom Brady. And he's around 78,000 yards, I believe, in 335 games. And Patrick Mahomes, for his career, Brady is at 89,214. I apologize. Patrick Mahomes, if he plays the same amount of games, 335, would have 100,610 yards. Would beat Brady by
luckily, he's got a
over
coach that's going to allow him to keep right. And luckily, he's got a coach that's going to keep devising ways for him to maintain maybe not the 5,000 yard output. We know that that's always a goal, but this particular season, having that deep game come back in, you can see that getting back towards it and trying to keep pushing that number. That's crazy. That's what, 22,000 yard lead if he were to keep the pace.
Yeah, it's going to be ridiculous where he's going to be. And you're sitting here looking at potentially a situation where obviously they play 17 games now, so that changes the math a little bit when you're looking at the per game, but it's still per game, not season, so that helps a little bit. But you have a chance to hit 5,000 yards probably every year, I would imagine, for the rest of Patrick Mahomes' career, because you're going to have 17 games, and maybe in the next several seasons you'll have 18 games. Now, whether or not he plays all those games because maybe you clinch your playoffs early or whatever, we'll see. But he's on pace to have quite a career, and he is on pace to just absolutely obliterate Tom Brady's records if he plays near as long as Tom. And he could break his records without playing as long as he did.
Mm-hmm. I think that is going to be the standout piece, because there are a lot of things that go into it, including how you keep a team around him that's able to allow him to do that. We're going to take a look at the career moments for what he's done to this point, including our standouts, before we get to what has to happen in the future. That's coming up next here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's the time right now with NBA and NHL playoffs. They are going through the roof, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home that big win of your own, especially if you're on to the hockey side right now. It's a plus 30 on the money line for the New York Rangers that can get in there. It's a minus 138 for the Dallas Stars, so maybe you're not looking that direction, but there are plenty of options as the playoffs heat up, and we're looking at a final series that's going to take all kinds of new heights to this region. Right now, new customers can get in that action. That's what it's about. You can get $150 back in bonus bets for winning a $5 bet, especially on those money lines, but you can also get into the spreads, the player props, and anything else that you're looking for. And it's in one place over at FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $150 back just for winning a $5 bet. Make every playoff shot count right now at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
As a golfer for years, I've been hearing PXG say nobody makes golf clubs like they do, period. You know what? They're right. I went in for a fitting and I saw for myself. I went in and I swung the PXG Black Ops driver. It's a total game changer. You no longer have to sacrifice distance for forgiveness. No matter how good the tools, getting fitted can take your game to a whole new level. And they'll even give you a dozen golf balls just for free, just for doing it. The world-class team of PXG experts will analyze every aspect of your swing with every club and give you feedback in real time on how to improve. Whether it's one-on-one working with the PXG experts or getting a chance to feel that PXG club in your hand and pick out your own grip that actually fits your style and fits your swing and fits how you play golf, PXG has you covered with this fitting. You have to go try it out. And if you're thinking PXG's high-performance equipment is too expensive, their clubs often cost less than the so-called leading brands. PXG made me a believer. They'll do the same for every golfer in Kansas City. Visit pxg.com/LockedOnChiefs to schedule your fitting at PXG Kansas City, 7517 West 119th Street in Overland Park. Get fitted for any club, and you'll get a dozen golf balls free. That's pxg.com/LockedOnChiefs to schedule your fitting. pxg.com/LockedOnChiefs. Limit 1 dozen golf balls per person. Promotion ends June 30th. Other terms and conditions may apply. See your store for details.
If you want to get all the action, whether it's NBA, NHL, or anything else going on, and you don't want to watch Fox and ESPN and have that on all day and hear all that shouting, go check out Locked On Sports today. It's can't miss local coverage of all the major teams, and it's 24/7 on YouTube for free, as well as Amazon Fire for free. Go get that today. The career path of Patrick Mahomes is what set us onto this discussion as we get ready for the OTA team building phase of the next step. We have to go back and look at the career moments that have really made this kind of come through so that it's buildable. Every franchise has a foundation it has to build on and then a path upward to its apogee, whatever you want to call it. There are a lot of steps in this one in particular, and they've been able to make them based on some big, big moments. What stands out for you in Patrick Mahomes' career to this point that not only like gives you that sense that he's here, but that he can sustain all the stats that we talked about in the first segment?
Well, and to me, it goes beyond the stats. It goes beyond anything that he's actually stat-wise. It goes beyond the stats because to me, you sit here and you look at his first Super Bowl run. Really is what spoke to me when you start looking at his career. Don't get me wrong, his first year starting 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns, MVP, fantastic. Don't get me wrong, it was a great year. Lost to the Patriots in the playoffs in the AFC Championship game, and obviously D Ford's offsides, whatever. He played well enough to win that game, although he struggled in the start. But you go to the next season, they get down 28 points to the Texans in, I believe, the first quarter, if not the early second quarter, and they come back and they are leading by halftime and end up beating them by something like 17 or 27 points. But what really stuck out to me that season, don't get me wrong, him playing great, but there was a lot of team effort, team different things. Block punt led to quick scores for the Chiefs in that playoff game against the Texans. Thank you, Dirty Dan. Or actually, it wasn't a block punt. It was a stopping a fake punt. I apologize. But you go and you look at the Tennessee Titan game the next week, and you're looking at a situation where it's the second quarter. It's, the quarter's almost over, and they're like 40 yards out. And Patrick Mahomes reels off a run that just defines greatness and will define his career and will probably be a top 5 moment of his career for probably the remainder of his career, no matter what happens. Because you watch him break the pocket, fake out a linebacker that has him pretty much dead to rights to at least get him out of bounds, and then go another 20 or 30 yards downfield. And just as he's getting ready to cross the plane of the end zone, somewhat fumble the ball because the ball did kind of pop loose at that moment, and still recover and get in the end zone. It just completely changed the way you see him as a player to me, because you saw the toughness, you saw the grit, you saw the competitiveness and the determination. Yeah, you've seen it at different times, but that play encapsulated everything.
And it's at that age too, it encapsulated the fact that he has all the nuance and all the subtlety. He had to fake one defender out there at the sideline, the one you were talking about, by throttling down to then reaccelerate. And for those who pay attention to quarterback metrics in the draft cycle, one of the things that I track is escapability. And that's getting out of the pocket to the sideline. It's very specific in its length, and that has everything to do with it. Then he's able to reaccelerate and go downfield. That's a whole different kind of estimation, but that's all putting the whole thing together with control and the field vision to make sure that you have an option there once you get past the guy to get to the end zone.
Well, and it wasn't just the field vision; it was his ability to slow down, like you said, but it was also his head fake, like his, nodding in, making him think he was going to cut back in, made the guy stop or hesitate for a second, and it let him get enough momentum to go outside and beat him around the corner. I mean, just the entire play. If you go back, I saw it a couple of times over the past week, and just you watch that play and you sit there and you're like, if he doesn't do this, he's tackled short. And they maybe score. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. But you watch that play, there was 3 or 4 different times where if he doesn't do just a specific subtle move, even at times, he's probably down well short of the goal line, and maybe they're kicking a field goal instead of scoring a touchdown.
Yeah, it all comes down to that. I think when we look back, that play will certainly be one of them. For me, it comes down to one big play, and it's not the way that it was executed for me that makes the biggest difference. It's about the question that was asked to get it there. And I think actually at this point, there are a few plays that could go around it. I think I want to dig into this a little bit farther. So what we'll do is the play that I think set it all up for the future, we're going to get to that right after this, coming up on the Locked On Podcast Network. Playoffs are in the air, both in the NBA and the NHL, but the NBA is starting to really get fired up. If you want to get in all the action, there is a way that you can play a bigger role. All these events come down to getting the right spot in the right venue at the right time. You can browse all the upcoming NBA playoff and finals games and the high-profile events that you're looking for right on the Gametime app. You can be specific about where you want to sit. You can take a look before you even have to make a purchase, and you can get last-minute ticket deals all the time, up to 60% off of sports, concerts, comedy, theater, anything that you're looking for. It's all in pricing, no surprises, and you can look at that seat before you even consider pressing the button. It's all at Gametime. You want to take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets or any playoff or any event, you can do it at the Gametime app by downloading the app, creating your account, and using our code LOCKEDONNFL. It's going to get you $20 off of your first purchase. Terms do apply, but all you have to do is create an account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL, and you're going to get $20 off of your first purchase. It's at Gametime. It's last-minute tickets, it's lowest prices, and it's guaranteed. The last thing that we have to cover when it comes to Patrick Mahomes, at least for this part of the discussion, I needed an extra minute here. So it goes back to how they get to this point, looking at a three-peat possibility. It's about having the wherewithal and the mental capacity to understand what you have to do. There's team building involved. I'm sure we'll talk about all that. But for me, it comes down to the question that Patrick Mahomes asked. It wasn't about the throw or how you set it up. It was, do we have time to run WASP? That's the pinnacle for me, because he had to go to Bieniemy. They had to work it out together. And it isn't a play call coming in from the coach. It's the quarterback understanding what he's getting and what he has to get in order to get this done. It's a heck of a play. And we can all celebrate what Tyreek Hill did on that play. The throw was immaculate, but it comes down to setting it up and choosing to run it. For me, that is the biggest career moment, because it made us understand that, yes, they're only going to be in contention, but they're also going to be in there for a championship every time because of this guy's mental capacity to attack where he has to.
And that's his third year in the NFL. That is the pinnacle of him being in the third year in the NFL. And he has the wherewithal to say, do we have time to run WASP? And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a great, I hate saying sign, but it's a great foretelling of what is to come, because his brain is so much different than some of the other players in the NFL. And you start looking at what makes him special. don't get me wrong, the arm talent is obviously makes him special. His ability to manipulate the pocket and move around makes him special. But his brain and his ability to think through and his ability to see what's on the field and know what's going on in the situation and be able to recall different plays. And in that specific situation, be able to sit there and say, do we have time to run this play? Shows how mentally capable he is, probably heads above most of the QBs in the NFL, just be able to have that thought process in that moment. But then you also look at, you talk about the play call and coming up the play call, knowing that he had to take a 7 or 8 or 9 step drop where he's 10 yards back from the line of scrimmage just to get the ball off and give Hill enough time to get downfield. That's a heads up play in and of itself. And let's not forget what led to that play, because what led to that play was him trying to run to the line of scrimmage because they thought Hill got a first down the play before it, and the Niners challenging it and rightly challenging it and getting it to a 3rd and long versus something where they would have had a first down in that situation. That is a heads up play in and of itself, leading to the Wasp play.
Yeah. And it's not just his mental capacity to understand the situation that he's in on the field. It's understanding the situation that he's in the franchise and in the league as well. And I think nothing's more dramatic about that than what he chose to do in signing that 10-year contract. His cap number this year, I'm sure you know it off the top of your head, but for me, it's relative. It's so low compared to what quarterbacks of quite dramatically less capability are getting right now. It will jump up in the future, I know, but they'll probably rework the deal and all those details. But it's about having the vision in that future and understanding where you can be so that you can do the one thing you have to do to have everything continue that we've talked about all day today. You have to have the team around you. You have to have blocking and you have to have weapons. Even last year with a dramatic dip, he was still able to produce because he had the other building blocks around him, including a defense that can help you out.
Well, and you talk about it, it's $37 million for this year. It's somewhere around 65 next year. That is going to be something that they have to do and they have to work on. And you talk about the numbers. You talk about his 10-year contract. What that tells you about him is we've talked about his mental capabilities. We talked about the physical capabilities. But the forethought in his mind of, it's not that he doesn't care about money, because I don't want to say it that way. But it is to an extent that he doesn't care about the money as much because he wants to win championships. It's all about his competitive desire and his understanding that if he goes out and wins championships, he may not make the money through the NFL. He's going to make it elsewhere. And he's going to have trophies and have a longer impact and a bigger impact in the NFL because of what he's able to do, because he's able to put players around him. Really quick, before we get away from the playoff talk, though, and the playoff glory, 3 playoff losses in his career in 3 Super Bowls.
Yeah. 3 up, 3 down. Is that what we're going to call that? I don't know if it's comparable for Super Bowl wins versus playoff single game losses, but yeah. I mean, when you look at it, how many years he hasn't won a Super Bowl versus the years that he has, let alone breaking it down 2 games, it's just so unfathomable for anybody who hasn't lived through this era in Kansas City to even think about. Even Tom Brady. Yes, that was dynastic as well, but you have to look at the longevity, as you mentioned at the top of the show, in just how many games have been played for Brady. And that brings us back full circle today, folks, to the GOAT conversation and all these things setting up for the possibility that not only is it a conversation right now, when Patrick is, correct me if I'm wrong, 29 years old, and we could still see a possible decade of play in a sport that other players have been able to go into their 40s successfully with. And the way that he takes care of himself, I think we have to project that pretty easily. That is just immensely comforting to know that he can have an up or down and still get to that GOAT point where it's no longer a discussion.
So we talk 3-3 when we're looking at playoff losses versus Super Bowl wins. How about this? He's 15-3 in his career in the playoffs. Over 83% winning percentage in the playoffs. Not the regular season.
We're not talking about
the playoffs. That is
We're lucky.
insane.
Folks, we've run this show for 8 years, and we just have to say at the end of the day, we're lucky because there has been no quarterback like this ever. And I don't know if there ever will be.
It's crazy to watch because you sit here and you look at some of these things and you look at postseason success. Don't get me wrong. Tom Brady has more Super Bowls. I get that. I understand it. Whether or not that'll end up being the case when everything's said and done with Mahomes, who knows? We'll see. But 15-3 in the playoffs is insane. And I don't know that you're going to see that. Tom Brady's career in the playoffs, 35-13.
That's a 3-to-1 ratio. That's pretty immense, but it's nowhere close to 5-to-1. It's incredible.
That's a 73%. That's a 73% winning percentage. That's a 10% difference between the two players themselves.
Yeah.
Let's not even talk about the fact that there's some insane stats, and I'm not talking playoffs, so I apologize. But you look at Patrick Mahomes being down 10 points. He's got a career winning percentage in that scenario, I believe that's over 50%, where other QBs, I think their best percentage is somewhere in the 20s. Like, it's just insane. You get him down 10 points, he finds a way to come back and win more often than not, and that is crazy in and of itself.
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion about the in-game mechanics of how you get these W's. But
it goes back to the mental capacity and capability. Sorry.
Yeah, no. And when it all breaks down, all those things feed into the fact that we're in position right now for that three-peat to watch him adjust again is going to be the story of this season. If they are able to pull that off, and it's a very long road from here, folks, as we get ready for OTAs phase 3, week 2. If they're able to do that, this whole conversation turns on its head. Because now it's not about can he catch him, because now he's outdone one thing, and it takes us right back to GOAT versus not GOAT and when that change occurs. So what sets it apart for you? What are the delineation points?
I was just going to say, and don't forget, if he does that, he will have 4 Super Bowls before he turns 30 and will be on pace to shatter Tom Brady's record. Now, whether or not he can stay on that pace is a whole nother discussion. But the simple fact that, again, and let's go back to what we just talked about a second ago. At that point, if they three-peat, he now has 4 Super Bowls to 3 playoff losses.
Yeah.
Show me a quarterback that's better than that.
You can't. And that'll exactly be my argument at the time. So we want to know what you think, though, folks. What are your opinions?
I was just going to say that also puts Kansas City at 5 Super Bowls, which puts their franchise closer to even getting to the higher escalations in the big Super Bowl picture when you start talking about franchises that have the most. And they'd be just behind Pittsburgh, I believe, and New England and San Francisco. So this franchise has changed a lot since Mahomes has been drafted. And we've been covering it since Mahomes has been drafted.
And all those teams that are up there at the high part, they all had their eras, right? You had the Terry Bradshaw era. You had the Joe Montana era. Obviously, Tom Brady, it's the closest one here, right? But to be living through the modern version of that and able to recognize it is something I don't think any of those other franchises had at the time that they were going through it. So that's just how special this is. What makes it special for you, and what makes this stand out? Is he the GOAT or not? Leave your opinions down on the YouTube comments. Leave them in the podcast reviews on Spotify, on Apple, anywhere that you get us, because we are 5 days a week for free on every single platform. You locos, we appreciate you, and get the insider information at 816-357-8781. Thanks for being with us today. OTAs are coming up. We have another great show for you tomorrow, and we're going to get reaction from Matt Derrick later in the week from the actual event. So be ready. Get another new glimpse at new Chiefs coming up starting tomorrow. Thanks for listening to us today, and we'll talk to you.